In the heart of a rain-soaked city, veteran firefighter Thomas Morgan thought he'd seen it all in his 30 years of service. But on this stormy September evening, as floodwaters surge through the streets of his old neighborhood, fate has something extraordinary in store. When desperate calls echo through dispatch about a child clinging to life in the rising waters, Morgan doesn't hesitate. What begins as a routine water rescue quickly transforms into something that will shake the very foundation of his existence. As he pulls the terrified boy to safety, a small metallic object clutched in the child's hand catches his eye. A tarnished locket he hasn't seen in 15 years. Could this mysterious boy hold the key to his daughter's disappearance? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The familiar scent of coffee and leather boots greeted Thomas Morgan as he pushed through the heavy doors of Station 42. Dawn had barely broken over the city skyline, casting long shadows across the well-worn floor of the firehouse. At 58, Morgan moved with the deliberate grace of a man who'd learned to conserve his energy for when it truly mattered. His salt and pepper hair, more salt than pepper these days, was cut military short, a habit from his early years that he'd never bothered to break. The station's photo wall caught his eye, as it did every morning. 27 faces stared back at him from the wall of honor, each telling its own story of sacrifice and service. His gaze lingered on the small photo tucked in the corner, a school portrait of a young girl with his eyes and her mother's smile. Emily. 15 years hadn't dulled the ache of her absence. "Coffee's fresh, old man," called a familiar voice. Ramon Martinez, his partner of 12 years, emerged from the kitchen area, 2 steaming mugs in hand. At 35, Martinez represented the next generation of firefighters, but he carried himself with an old soul's wisdom. "You're early again." Morgan accepted the offered mug with a slight nod. "Sleep's overrated, kid." "Yeah? Tell that to your reaction times in yesterday's drill." Martinez's gentle ribbing carried no real sting. It was their morning ritual, as much a part of the job as equipment checks and weather reports. The station house slowly came to life around them. The day shift crew filtered in, their voices echoing off the high ceilings and polished trucks. Morgan settled into his usual spot by the dispatch desk, spreading out the morning paper while keeping one ear tuned to the scanner's steady crackle. "You seen the forecast?" Martinez asked, pulling up a chair. "They're saying we might get some serious rain later. Flash flood warnings all over the county." Morgan glanced at the weather radar displayed on the station's main monitor. A massive system was crawling across the state, its colors shifting from yellow to angry red. "Wouldn't be the first time they've overreacted," he said, but something in his gut told him different. After 3 decades on the job, he'd developed an almost supernatural sense for when trouble was brewing. The morning briefing brought the usual updates: road closures, hydrant maintenance schedules, and a reminder about the upcoming retirement party for Chief Patterson. Morgan only half listened, his mind drifting to the dream that had woken him at 3 a.m., the same dream that had haunted him for 15 years. In it, Emily was always just ahead of him, running through a maze of dark corridors. He could hear her calling, but every time he turned a corner, she was already disappearing around the next. The dream always ended the same way, with him finding nothing but her small silver locket lying on the ground, its clasp broken. The real locket had never been found. The police had searched for months, following leads that grew colder with each passing day. Morgan had nearly lost himself in those early years, driving away his wife and alienating friends with his obsessive pursuit of any possible clue. Eventually, the department psychologist had given him an ultimatum: learn to live with the uncertainty or turn in his badge. So he'd learned to live with it, or at least he'd gotten better at pretending. He threw himself into his work, mentoring younger firefighters, like Martinez, and trying to save every child he could. as if each rescue might somehow balance the cosmic scales. "Earth to Morgan," Martinez's voice cut through his reverie. "You planning on joining us for the equipment check, or should I tell Cap you're taking a mental health decade?" Morgan folded his paper with practiced precision. "Just thinking about Patterson's party. Trying to decide if I should tell the story about Atlantic City." Martinez's eyes widened. "There's a story about Atlantic City." "There's always a story about Atlantic City, kid. But some secrets go to the grave." Morgan stood, his knees protesting slightly. The morning sun had fully risen now, warming the station's brick walls and casting geometric patterns through the high windows. As they began their daily inspection of Truck 7, Morgan's thoughts kept returning to the weather radar. The approaching storm system reminded him of another September day, 15 years ago, when the skies had opened up and changed his life forever. He'd learned the hard way that nature's fury could sweep away everything you loved in an instant, leaving nothing but questions and a hollow space where certainty used to live. But today was just another day at Station 42, and there were hoses to check, gauges to read, and a new shift of possibilities waiting to unfold. Morgan ran his hand along the truck's polished red surface, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm. Whatever the weather might bring, he would be ready. It was all he knew how to be. The first real signs of trouble came shortly after lunch. Morgan was reviewing maintenance logs when the station's weather warning system erupted in a series of sharp, insistent beeps. The digital display, mounted prominently near dispatch, flashed. An urgent message: flash flood warning, immediate effect. Captain Sandra Chen, a 20-year veteran who'd earned her position through equal parts grit and tactical brilliance, emerged from her office. Her expression carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many 100-year storms in the past decade. "Listen up, people." The station fell silent as Chen gestured toward the wall-mounted screens showing multiple weather radar views. "We've got 3 storm cells converging over the metro area. National Weather Service is predicting rainfall rates of up to 3 inches per hour. The ground's already saturated from last week's rain, and they're expecting significant flooding in low-lying areas." Morgan felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he studied the radar imagery. The storm system had evolved into something monstrous, its red core pulsing like a malevolent heart. He'd seen this pattern before, back when... "Morgan," Chen's voice snapped him back to the present. "You know the flood-prone areas better than anyone. What are we looking at?" Standing, Morgan approached the map. "The old industrial district will flood first. Storm drains that haven't been updated since the 80s? Then we'll see problems in Riverside Heights." His finger traced a path along the map, especially around Cedar Street where the gradient changes. "But the real concern is here." He tapped a spot near the center of the city. "Milton Valley, it's like a bowl. Once the water starts flowing in, it doesn't flow out," Chen finished. "All right, people, this is not a drill. I want every piece of water rescue equipment checked and ready in the next 30 minutes. Morgan Martinez, you're on Truck 7. I need your experience on this one." The station erupted into controlled chaos as crews prepared for what everyone knew would be a long and dangerous shift. Morgan moved with practiced efficiency, helping Martinez secure the water rescue gear while maintaining radio contact with neighboring stations. The first drops hit the station's windows as they finished their preparations. Within minutes, the gentle patter transformed into a deafening roar. Through the bay doors, Morgan watched sheets of rain turn the street into a shallow river. "This is dispatch to all units," the radio crackled. "We're receiving multiple calls for water rescues. Priority 1 situation at 1242 Cedar Street. Caller reports water rising rapidly in basement apartment with elderly resident trapped inside." "Truck 7 responding," Chen's voice cut through the static. "Morgan Martinez, you're up." As they pulled out of the station, Morgan's decades of experience told him this storm was different. The rain fell with an almost solid force, reducing visibility to mere feet. Their emergency lights created ghostly halos in the downpour. Martinez navigated carefully through intersections already beginning to flood. "Man, I've never seen it come down like this," he muttered, knuckles white on the wheel. "Keep your head clear," Morgan advised, though his own thoughts kept drifting to another storm, another rescue. He pushed the memories aside. "Focus on the now," he reminded himself. "That's what keeps you alive in this job." They arrived at Cedar Street to find the situation deteriorating rapidly. Water churned ankle-deep around the truck's tires as Morgan and Martinez deployed, other units arriving close behind. The rescue itself was textbook. Difficult, but straightforward. The elderly resident was extracted safely, though her apartment was a total loss, but it was only the beginning. As the afternoon wore on, the calls became more frequent and more desperate. Morgan and Martinez moved from one rescue to another, pulling people from cars, homes, and businesses. The radio traffic was constant now, a steady stream of emergencies punctuated by the occasional crackle of thunder. "Dispatch to all units." The radio cut through the noise of the storm. "Be advised, Milton Valley Dam is reporting unprecedented water levels. Emergency spillway may be activated within the hour." Morgan exchanged a look with Martinez. They both knew what that meant. If the spillway opened, parts of the old neighborhood would be underwater within minutes. "Truck 7 to dispatch." Morgan keyed his radio. "What's the evacuation status of the Milton Valley area?" "Police are going door to door now," came the response. "But we're getting reports of multiple residents refusing to leave." Morgan closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of what was coming. The old neighborhood, his old neighborhood, was full of stubborn souls who'd weathered countless storms. But this one was different. This one felt personal, as if the very sky had a score to settle. A new call crackled over the radio, its urgency cutting through the general chaos. "Dispatch to any available units. We have reports of a child seen in the water near the Milton Valley Bridge. Repeat, child in the water." Before dispatch had finished speaking, Morgan was already moving. "Truck 7 responding," he called, even as Martinez gunned the engine. They both knew that in swift water rescue, minutes, sometimes seconds, made the difference between life and death. As they raced toward Milton Valley Bridge, Morgan found himself thinking of Emily again. She would have been 23 now. Would she have followed him into the fire service? Would she have inherited his stubborn dedication to saving others? The questions, as always, remained unanswered. But as the truck's tires splashed through, deepening water, Morgan felt that familiar surge of purpose. Whatever this storm had in store, whatever ghosts it might stir up, he would face them, because that's what he did. That's what he'd always done. The bridge loomed ahead through the curtain of rain, its familiar outline made strange by the storm's fury. Somewhere in that maelstrom, a child needed help. And Thomas Morgan was about to discover that some rescues change more than just one life. Truck 7 pulled up to Milton Valley Bridge as lightning split the sky, illuminating a scene from Morgan's worst nightmares. The usually peaceful river had transformed into a raging torrent, its waters the color of crude oil, debris, branches, trash cans, even parts of wooden fencing, shot past like missiles in the current. "There!" Martinez's shout cut through the storm's roar. About 50 yards downstream, a dark shape clung to what appeared to be a partially submerged beam. Even from this distance, Morgan could see it was a child. Morgan was already pulling on his rescue gear, muscle memory taking over as he secured each strap and clip. "Radio it in," he ordered Martinez. "Get back up here now and get that spotlight on the kid. We can't lose sight of them." The rescue rope, bright yellow and rated for twice the tension it would likely face, felt familiar. In his hands, Morgan had trained with it countless times, could tie the required knots in his sleep. But tonight, with the wind howling and rain stinging his face, every movement had to be perfect. "Morgan," Captain Chen's voice crackled through his radio. "Status report." Child in the water, approximately 50 yards downstream from Milton Valley. Bridge, he responded, voice steady despite his racing heart. Appears to be conscious and holding on to debris. Currents too strong for a direct approach. Going to attempt a downstream rescue. Understood. Additional units are 4 minutes out. Be careful, Tom. Morgan smiled grimly. Careful wasn't an option when a child's life hung in the balance. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, 15 years ago. Martinez helped secure Morgan's safety line as they moved to a better position. The spotlight beam cut through the rain, illuminating their target. Now Morgan could see the child more clearly. A boy, probably no more than 10, clutching desperately to what looked like a wooden support beam from someone's deck. "Hey!" Morgan shouted, his voice carrying over the storm. "Can you hear me? Hold on tight. We're coming to get you." The boy's head turned slightly, acknowledging the voice. Good. He was alert enough to respond. Morgan quickly calculated angles and currents, his experienced eye reading the water's movement. The rescue would require perfect timing. Too early, and the rope might not reach. Too late, and the current might sweep the boy past their position. "Ready?" he asked Martinez, who had taken up position as his anchor. "Born ready, old man. Just don't make me have to fish you out too." Morgan moved to the edge, feeling the rain-slicked concrete under his boots. The river churned below, hungry and impatient. For a moment, he was transported back to another stormy night, another desperate search, but this time would be different. This time, he wouldn't fail. He began swinging the rescue rope in a smooth arc, building momentum. The boy was still holding on, but Morgan could see his strength failing. The beam shifted treacherously in the current. "Now or never," Morgan muttered, and released the rope with a practiced flick of his wrist. The line sailed through the rain-filled air, its trajectory a perfect arc toward the stranded child. The first throw fell short, caught by a sudden gust of wind. Morgan quickly reeled it in, ignoring the burning in his shoulders. Age might have slowed him down, but it had also taught him patience. Sometimes you only got one chance at a rescue. Sometimes you got several. The trick was treating each attempt like it was your last. "You've got this," Martinez encouraged, his voice barely audible over the storm. Morgan took a deep breath, centered himself, and threw again. This time the rope landed just beyond the boy, within arm's reach of his position. "Grab the rope," Morgan shouted. "Let go of the beam and grab the rope." For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the boy moved, one hand reaching out, while the other maintained its death grip on the beam. Morgan could see the terror in his face, illuminated by the truck's spotlight. "You can do it," Morgan called. "I won't let you go, I promise." Something in those words seemed to reach the child. In one fluid motion, he released the beam and lunged for the rope. Morgan felt the line go taut as the boy's weight hit it, the current immediately trying to tear him away. "I've got him!" Morgan braced himself against the pull. "Martinez, start the haul!" Together they began the careful process of bringing the boy in. The current fought them every inch of the way, but Morgan had been doing this too long to let nature win. Slowly, steadily, they drew the child toward safety. As the boy neared the bank, Morgan could see he was wearing a blue school backpack, somehow still attached despite the water's fury. His dark hair was plastered to his face, and his eyes were wide with fear and exhaustion. "Almost there," Morgan encouraged. "Just hold on a little longer." The final few feet were the most dangerous. The bank here was steep and slippery, and many rescue attempts failed in these crucial moments. Morgan handed his end of the rope to another firefighter who had arrived as backup, then lay flat on his stomach, reaching down toward the water. "When I say now, reach up with your free hand," he instructed the boy. "I'll pull you the rest of the way." The child nodded, understanding. His small face showed a determination that tugged at Morgan's heart. Now their hands met, clasped. Morgan pulled, feeling muscles protest as he lifted the boy clear of the water's grasp. Then Martinez was there too, and together they hauled the child onto solid ground. The boy collapsed onto his hands and knees, coughing up river water and shaking violently. Morgan quickly wrapped an emergency blanket around his shoulders, checking vitals with practiced efficiency. "You're safe now," he assured the child. "What's your name, son?" The boy tried to speak, couldn't, then tried again. Jamie, he managed between chattering teeth. "Jamie Chen." Morgan froze. Chen wasn't an uncommon name, but something about the way the boy said it. That's when he noticed what Jamie was clutching in his right hand. Something small and metallic, its surface tarnished by age and water. Morgan's heart seemed to stop. As recognition dawned, it was a silver locket, its design unmistakable even after 15 years. The same delicate filigree pattern around the edges, the same small dent on one corner from where Emily had dropped it playing soccer. His daughter's locket. Where? Morgan's voice failed him. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Jamie, where? Did you get that?" But before the boy could answer, the paramedics arrived, swarming around them with medical equipment and urgent questions. Morgan found himself pushed back, away from Jamie and the locket that would change everything. As he watched the ambulance doors close, Morgan felt the weight of destiny settling around his shoulders. After 15 years of dead ends and fading hopes, the current had delivered not just a child from danger, but perhaps the key to unlocking his deepest loss. The storm continued to rage around them, but Morgan barely noticed. His world had narrowed to a single point of focus, a small silver locket carried by a boy named Chen, pulled from the same waters that had taken his daughter so many years ago. Morgan stood in the emergency room's fluorescent glare, his wet uniform leaving puddles on the linoleum floor. The locket sat heavy in his palm, its familiar weight sending tremors through his carefully constructed world. 15 years of carefully maintained control threatened to crumble as he traced the familiar pattern with his thumb. "You should get checked out yourself," Martinez said, appearing at his side with 2 cups of vending machine coffee. That was one hell of a rescue. Morgan accepted the coffee without taking his eyes off the locket. "I need to know where he got this, Ramon." Martinez studied his partner's face with concern. In 12 years, he'd never seen Morgan like this. The usual stoic demeanor replaced by something raw and urgent. The kid's still being examined. His parents are on their way. The emergency room buzzed with activity around them, casualties of the storm filling every available space. Nurses and doctors moved with practiced efficiency, their voices a steady murmur beneath the occasional crack of thunder from outside. Morgan's fingers found the locket's clasp, still stuck, just as it had been the last time he'd seen it around Emily's neck. The mechanism had always been temperamental, requiring a specific touch to open. Emily had loved that about it, claiming it held special secrets only she could access. "I don't understand," Martinez said quietly. "How can you be sure it's the same one? Silver lockets aren't exactly rare." Finally, Morgan looked up. "See this dent?" He pointed to the corner. "Emily did that playing soccer in the backyard. And here," his finger moved to a tiny scratch near the clasp. "That happened when she fell off her bike the summer she turned 8. I used to know every mark on this thing. Used to help her clean it every Sunday night before school." Martinez leaned closer, examining the tarnished surface. "Have you tried opening it?" "Not yet." Morgan's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm afraid of what I might find inside, or worse, what I might not find." A doctor emerged from the examination room, clipboard in hand. Morgan straightened, years of professional discipline taking over. "How is he?" "Jamie's going to be fine," the doctor assured them. "Mild hypothermia, some scrapes and bruises, but nothing serious. He's asking for the firefighter who saved him." Morgan glanced at Martinez, who nodded. "Go. I'll handle the incident. Report." The examination room was warm, almost uncomfortably so. Jamie sat propped up on the bed, wrapped in thermal blankets. His dark eyes followed Morgan as he entered, recognition flickering across his young face. "You're the one who pulled me out," Jamie said. It wasn't a question. Morgan pulled up a chair, careful to move slowly, non-threateningly. In his experience, kids who'd been through trauma needed space, needed to feel in control. "That's right. I'm Thomas Morgan. How are you feeling?" "Cold, but better." Jamie's gaze dropped to Morgan's hand, where the locket was still visible. "That's my grandmother's." Morgan's heart skipped a beat. "Your grandmother's?" He kept his voice steady through sheer force of will. "Can you tell me about it?" Jamie shifted under the blankets, looking suddenly uncertain. "I'm not supposed to talk about family stuff with strangers. That's what my mum says." "Your mum is very wise," Morgan agreed. "But I'm not exactly a stranger now, am I? And this locket, it's very important to me. I think it might have belonged to my daughter before your grandmother had it." Something changed in Jamie's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. But before he could respond, the door burst open and a woman rushed in. "Jamie!" she gathered, the boy in her arms, her relief palpable. "We were so worried. When the school called about the bus being diverted and then we couldn't reach you." Morgan stood, stepping back to give them space, but his movement caught the woman's attention. She turned and Morgan felt the world tilt sideways. He knew those eyes. They were Captain Chen's eyes. They were Emily's eyes. "Mrs. Chen," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. "I'm firefighter Morgan. I was part of the rescue team." She straightened, keeping one hand on Jamie's shoulder. "Thank you for saving my son. I'm Sarah Chen." She paused, studying his face. "Have we met before? You look familiar." Morgan's grip tightened on the locket. "Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you about this. Your son was holding it when we pulled him from the water. He says it belonged to his grandmother." Sarah. Chen's face went through a complex series of emotions as she saw the locket. Recognition, shock, and something else Morgan couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe? "Where did you get that?" Her voice had lost its warmth. "Mom," Jamie interrupted, "he says it belonged to his daughter before grandmother had it." Sarah Chen's face went pale. She turned to her son, speaking rapidly in Chinese. Jamie responded in the same language, his voice rising slightly in protest. Morgan waited, every nerve ending alive with anticipation. After 15 years of dead ends and false hopes, he knew in his bones that he was finally close to something real. The way Sarah Chen had reacted to the locket, her apparent recognition of his face, it all meant something. Finally, she turned back to him. "Mr. Morgan, this is neither the time nor the place for this conversation. My son has been through a traumatic experience, and he needs rest." "Mrs. Chen, please." Morgan took a step forward, then stopped as she tensed. "For 15 years, I've been looking for answers. This locket is the first real lead I've had since my daughter disappeared. If you know something, anything about how it came to be in your family's possession—" I said not now. Her voice was steel, but Morgan caught the slight tremor in her hands as she gathered Jamie's things. "If you have questions, you can direct them to my mother, or better yet, to the police." She scribbled something on a piece of paper and thrust it at him. "This is my mother's address. Don't come before noon tomorrow." "And Mr. Morgan?" She met his eyes directly. "Be very sure you want the answers you're looking for. Some questions are better left unasked." With that, she helped Jamie into a wheelchair, and they were gone, leaving Morgan alone with the locket and an address that might finally lead him to the truth about Emily's disappearance. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but a different kind of thunder was building in Morgan's chest. After 15 years of searching, he finally had a lead. But Sarah Chen's warning echoed in his mind, mixing with the memory of Emily's laugh, the weight of the locket in his hand, and the growing certainty that his life was about to change forever. He pulled out his phone and called the one person he knew would understand. "Martinez, I need a favor, a big one." "Let me guess," his partner replied. "You want me to cover the rest of your shift?" "Yeah, something's happening here, Ramon. Something big. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Be careful, Tom. You've been down this road before." Morgan looked at the address in his hand, then at the locket. "Not like this, never like this." Dawn broke over the city like a bruise. Purple and yellow light filtering through storm clouds that had finally begun to exhaust themselves. Morgan sat in his truck outside the address Sarah Chen had given him, watching the sun creep over the horizon. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. The locket lay on his dashboard, catching occasional glints of morning light. The house before him was modest but well-maintained, with carefully tended flower beds and wind chimes that swayed in the post-storm breeze. A red brick two-story that could have been plucked from any middle-class suburb in America. Nothing about it suggested it might hold the key to his daughter's disappearance. His phone buzzed, a text from Martinez. "Called in some favors. Detective Sarah Chen, Major Crimes Division, 15 years on the force, clean record, good closure rate, no obvious connection to your case." Morgan typed back a quick thanks, then checked the time again. 11:57 a.m. Close enough to noon. He grabbed the locket and stepped out of his truck, his boots crunching on storm debris that littered the street. Before he could reach the front door, it opened. An elderly Chinese woman stood in the doorway, her posture straight despite her apparent age. She wore a simple blue dress and a stern expression that reminded Morgan of his fourth-grade teacher. "Mr. Morgan," she said, her English precise and unaccented, "I've been expecting you. Please, come in." Morgan followed her into a living room that smelled of jasmine tea and old books. Family photos lined the walls. He spotted Jamie and several of them, younger versions of Sarah Chen and an older man who must have been Jamie's grandfather. "I am Ming Chen," the woman said, gesturing for him to sit. "You have questions about the locket." Morgan took a seat, noticing how she positioned herself to keep the room's exit in view. A cop's habit, or perhaps something else. "Mrs. Chen, this locket belonged to my daughter Emily. She was wearing it the day she disappeared 15 years ago." Ming Chen's face remained impassive. "Tea? Mrs. Chen, please. I need to know." "Tea first," she interrupted firmly. "Some conversations require proper preparation." Morgan watched as she prepared the tea with precise, practiced movements. Each gesture seemed laden with meaning, part of some larger ritual he didn't fully understand. Finally, she handed him a delicate cup and took her own seat. "Your daughter," Ming Chen said after taking a sip. "She was 8 years old when she vanished?" "Yes." Morgan's hand tightened around the teacup. "From Milton Valley Park. There was a storm, like yesterday. She was wearing this locket. It was a gift from her mother." Ming Chen nodded slowly. "And in 15 years, no trace was ever found." "Nothing." The word tasted bitter in his mouth. "Until yesterday, when your grandson had it." A long silence followed, broken only by the gentle chiming of wind bells outside. Ming Chen seemed to be weighing something in her mind, her dark eyes studying Morgan with uncomfortable intensity. "What do you know," she finally asked, "about the Red Thread Initiative?" Morgan frowned. "Never heard of it." "No, you wouldn't have. Very few people have." She set her teacup down with a barely audible clink. "It was a program, Mr. Morgan, a very secret, very illegal program, run by people who believed they were doing the right thing." Morgan leaned forward. "What kind of program?" "The kind that takes children from situations they deem problematic and places them with more suitable families." Her voice carried a weight of old anger. "I worked for them, Mr. Morgan, not by choice. They had leverage. My daughter, Sarah. They threatened her if I didn't help process the paperwork, create new identities." Morgan's world tilted sideways. "Are you saying Emily was one of many?" Ming Chen's face showed the first crack in its composure, a flicker of old pain. "I didn't handle her case directly, but I saw the file. A single father, deemed unstable after his wife left. A child they decided would be better off elsewhere." The teacup shattered in Morgan's grip, hot liquid spilling across his hand. He barely felt it. "Where is she?" "Mr. Morgan." a new voice said from the doorway. "I thought I told you to wait." Sarah Chen stood there, still in her detective suit, her badge visible on her belt. Her expression was unreadable, but her hand rested near her weapon. "Sarah," Ming Chen said softly, "he needs to know." "What he needs," Sarah replied, "is to understand what he's walking into. This isn't just about one missing child anymore. The Red Thread initiative involved dozens of families, multiple jurisdictions. There are people still in power who want this kept quiet." Morgan stood, his voice raw. "I don't care about politics or jurisdictions. I want to know where my daughter is." "Sit down, Mr. Morgan." Sarah's tone left no room for argument. "If you want answers, you'll need to hear the whole story. And believe me, it's not what you're expecting." She moved into the room, closing the door behind her. "Jamie," she called out. "You can come in now." The boy appeared, looking small and uncertain in the doorway. He carried his backpack, the same one he'd had during the rescue. "Show him," Sarah instructed gently. Jamie unzipped the backpack and pulled out a worn notebook. Its pages were filled with newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes. "I've been looking for you too," he said quietly. "Ever since I found out about my sister." Morgan's heart stopped. "Your sister?" Sarah Chen took a deep breath. "Mr. Morgan, 15 years ago, the Red Thread initiative didn't just take Emily. They split up siblings, erased family connections. Jamie and Emily, they're both my children, adopted through the program. It took me years to piece it together, to realize what my own mother had been forced to participate in." Ming Chen spoke up. "When I finally told Sarah the truth," she began, "investigating, quietly, carefully. She's been building a case, gathering evidence. But the organization still has reach. They've already tried to stop her once." Morgan looked at the notebook in Jamie's hands, at the family photos on the walls, at the 3 generations of Chens, watching him with varying degrees of concern and sympathy. "Where is Emily now?" Sarah Chen pulled out her phone, pressed a few buttons and handed it to him. On the screen was a photo of a young woman, maybe 23, with his eyes and her mother's smile. She was wearing a police uniform. "Emily Chen," Sarah said softly. "She followed in my footsteps. She's a rookie officer in Seattle. And she has no idea who she really is." Morgan stared at the photo, his vision blurring. His daughter was alive, had been alive all this time, growing up, becoming a police officer, living a life parallel to his own, but completely separate. "Why are you telling me this now?" he managed to ask. "Because yesterday changed everything," Sarah replied. "When Jamie found that locket in my mother's old papers and took it to school, we didn't expect him to nearly drown. We didn't expect you to be the one to save him. But now that you know—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The people behind the initiative, they're still out there, still powerful. If we're going to expose them, if we're going to make this right, we need your help." Morgan looked at the photo again, at the daughter he'd lost and found in the space of a day. Then he looked at Jamie, this unexpected connection to Emily, and at the 2 women who had kept this secret for so long. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." The old case files lay spread across Sarah Chen's dining room table, their manila folders faded and dog-eared from years of secret scrutiny. Morgan's hands trembled slightly as he opened the one marked Emily Morgan, case just 2847. Inside, his daughter's life had been reduced to clinical observations and bureaucratic notations. "They watched us for months before they took her," Sarah explained, pulling out a series of surveillance photos. "They documented everything, your work schedule, her school routine, even the custody arrangements with her mother." Morgan studied a photo of himself and Emily at the park, dated 3 weeks before her disappearance. They were playing catch, both laughing at something now lost to time. "How did I not notice?" "They were professionals," Ming Chen said from her position by the window where she kept watch for unexpected visitors. "Ex-intelligence officers, private security contractors. They knew how to remain invisible." Sarah pulled out another file, this one newer. Once I realized what was happening, I started my own investigation. Quiet inquiries, unofficial channels. The initiative had a pattern. They targeted single parents, usually those involved in high-risk professions, police, firefighters, military. People who could be painted as unstable, Morgan growled, the old anger rising. People whose jobs could be used against them. Exactly. Sarah opened her laptop, pulling up a database she'd clearly spent years building. They had judges in their pocket, social workers on their payroll. When a child disappeared, they made sure the investigation led nowhere. The parents were often subtly discredited. Suggestions of mental instability planted evidence of negligence. Morgan remembered the whispers that had followed Emily's disappearance, the sideways glances from colleagues, the careful suggestions that maybe he should consider a desk job. They tried that with me, it didn't stick. Because you wouldn't let it, Jamie piped up from where he sat doing homework, though Morgan suspected the boy was listening to every word. That's why they had to change their whole operation. You kept pushing, kept investigating. You scared them. Morgan looked at the boy, his daughter's brother, though neither had known it, with newfound appreciation. You've really studied this, haven't you? Jamie nodded, pulling out his notebook again. Mom doesn't know everything I've found. Like this. He flipped to a page filled with careful notes. 3 months after Emily disappeared, 4 other kids went missing in different cities. All of them had parents in law enforcement or emergency services. All of them were eventually adopted through the same network of agencies. Sarah frowned at her son. Jamie, we talked about this. You're not supposed to be investigating on your own. He's good, Morgan said, studying the boy's notes. He's made connections we missed. He turned to Jamie. How did you find all this? Internet searches mostly. Old newspaper archives. And, he glanced guiltily at his mother, I might have borrowed your password for the police database. Just once. Sarah's expression darkened, but Morgan interrupted before she could speak. The password wouldn't have helped unless you knew what to look for. How did you know? Jamie fell silent, looking uncertain. Ming Chen answered for him. He found letters I had hidden away years ago from other families involved in the program. Parents like you, Mr. Morgan, who never stopped searching. The initiative used me to process paperwork, but I kept copies. Insurance, I told myself, though perhaps it was really conscience. Morgan turned to the elderly woman. These letters, do you still have them? Some. Others I destroyed when it became too dangerous to keep them. But the ones I have... She crossed to an old secretary desk, unlocking a hidden compartment with a key she wore around her neck. These are from parents who figured it out, who started asking the right questions. Most of them were silenced, one way or another. The implications hung heavy in the air. Sarah broke the tension, pulling out her own files. That's why we have to be careful. The initiative isn't just an organization, it's a network. Judges, politicians, wealthy donors who believe they're saving children by placing them with better families. How high does it go? Morgan asked, though he wasn't. Sure, he wanted to know the answer. High enough to make this dangerous, Sarah replied. We're talking about people who've built their careers on respectability, who've convinced themselves they're doing good. They won't go down easily. Morgan picked up a photo of Emily. No, Emily Chen now, in her police uniform. Does she suspect anything about her past? Sarah shook her head. I don't think so. The initiative was thorough. They created complete backstories, documentation, even manufactured childhood photos. As far as Emily knows, she's always been Emily Chen, my daughter, Jamie's sister. But she kept some habits, Jamie said suddenly. Mom doesn't know this either, but Emily still can't sleep without a nightlight. She still hates thunderstorms. And she has this thing about lockets. She collects them, but she can never explain why. Morgan felt his throat tighten. Emily had always been afraid of the dark, ever since she could talk. The nightlight had been a constant source of gentle teasing from her mother. "We have to tell her," he said, his voice rough. "She deserves to know the truth." "It's not that simple," Sarah warned. "The moment we contact her, we risk exposing everything. The initiative has people watching her too. They monitor all their placements, especially the ones in law enforcement." "Then we need proof," Morgan said firmly. "Proof they can't bury or discredit. Ming's letters, Jamie's research, your investigation. It's a start, but we need more." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You understand what you're suggesting? Going after these people? It could cost all of us everything. Our jobs, our freedom, maybe even our lives." Morgan looked at the photo of Emily again, then at Jamie, who watched him with those eerily familiar eyes. "They've already taken everything from me once. I won't let them keep my daughter in the dark about who she really is. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, she deserves the truth." Ming Chen returned to her post by the window, her face grave. "Then we'll need help. I still have contacts. People who worked for the initiative, but had changes of heart. Some might be willing to talk if approached carefully. And I have access to case files," Sarah added. "Not officially, but I can get to them. Start connecting the dots between disappearances and adoptions." Jamie closed his notebook with a determined snap. "I can help too. I'm good at finding patterns." "And they won't suspect a kid." "No," Sarah and Morgan said simultaneously. They looked at each other, surprised by their parental unity. "He's already involved," Ming said quietly. "The moment he found that locket, he became part of this. Better he help us under supervision than investigate on his own." Morgan recognized the truth in her words, even as his protective instincts rebelled against involving a child in something so dangerous. But hadn't Emily been even younger when she was caught up in this web of secrets and lies? "We do this smart," he said finally. "We do this careful, and we do this right. Emily deserves nothing less." Outside, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across Sarah Chen's dining room table. Among the scattered files and photos, Morgan's daughter smiled up at him from her police graduation picture, not knowing that her whole life was built on carefully constructed lies. Not knowing that her real father had never stopped searching for her. That was about to change. One way or another, the truth would come out, and the Red Thread Initiative would learn that some families couldn't be broken, no matter how carefully you tried to unravel them. The city map covered an entire wall of Sarah Chen's garage, carefully hidden behind stacked storage boxes. Red pins marked confirmed initiative cases, blue ones indicated suspected incidents, and yellow strings connected related events. It looked like something from a crime thriller, Morgan thought, except every pin represented a shattered family, a stolen child. 7 cases in our jurisdiction alone, Sarah explained, tracing a pattern with her finger. All within a 5-year period, around Emily's disappearance. But look here. She pointed to a cluster of pins in neighboring counties. They were active across state lines, made it harder to connect the cases. Morgan studied the map, his firefighter's instinct for pattern recognition kicking in. They stayed close to major highways, easy escape routes. Exactly. Sarah pulled out a fresh set of documents from her secure laptop. And look at the timing. Every disappearance happened during or just after some kind of crisis. Storms, fires, civil emergencies. Times when first responders would be stretched thin. Like yesterday's flood, Jamie added from his position at a folding table where he was digitizing his grandmother's old letters. Ming Chen sat beside him, providing context for each document. Morgan felt a chill. "You think they're still operating? Still taking children?" "I think they never stopped," Sarah replied grimly. "They just got better at hiding it, changed their methods, adapted to new technology." She pulled up a series of recent news articles on her laptop. "See these? 3 cases in the past year, all classified as parental kidnappings or runaways, all involving children of first responders or military personnel." Ming Chen spoke up, her voice carrying decades of carefully contained anger. They learn and adapt. When Mr. Morgan's persistence exposed weaknesses in their methods, they changed tactics. Now they create situations that make the parents appear unstable or negligent. They plant evidence, manipulate circumstances. Like the storm that day, Morgan said quietly, old memories surfacing with new clarity. I always thought it was strange how Emily ended up at the park alone. Her mother swore she'd dropped her at Jessica Reeves's house for a playdate, but Jessica's family insisted they'd never made those arrangements. Sarah nodded. They probably intercepted communications, created confusion deliberately, made it look like a series of innocent mistakes that led to tragedy. She pulled out another file. Look at this case from last year. Father was a SWAT commander. His daughter supposedly ran away after he had a public argument with her at a mall. Security. Footage showed him grabbing her arm, yelling. He swears it never happened. Deep fakes, Jamie said, looking up from his work. They could use AI to create fake videos now. It's getting harder to tell what's real. Morgan watched the boy. So young, yet so knowledgeable about things no child should have to understand. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Jamie shrugged, but his eyes were serious. Emily's my sister. Even if I just found out, she's family, and they're still hurting other families. Ming Chen rested a hand on her grandson's shoulder, her expression proud despite her concern. He's like his mother. Like Emily too, from what Sarah tells me. They can't ignore injustice. Morgan turned back to the map, focusing on the most recent cases. These 3 new ones. Have you made contact with the families? Sarah shook her head. Too dangerous. The initiative has gotten more sophisticated. About monitoring the parents afterward. One wrong move could put everyone at risk. She hesitated, including Emily. But that's why we need to move now, Morgan insisted. Every day we wait is another day she lives a lie. Another day they might realize we're onto them and move her somewhere we can't find her. I know. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, a gesture of frustration Morgan was beginning to recognize. But we need hard evidence, something that proves the connection between all these cases, something that leads back to the people in charge. Jamie suddenly sat up straighter. What about the adoption agencies? The adults turned to look at him. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Well, all these kids had to go somewhere, right? New families, new schools, new lives. That means paperwork. Even if they faked it, there has to be a trail. And look, he pulled up one of his research documents. 3 different agencies, but they all had the same law firm handling their incorporations. Morgan and Sarah exchanged looks. Kids got a point, Morgan said. Follow the money, and you find who's really in charge. Sarah finished. She moved to her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. Wellspring Adoptions, New Life Family Services, and Hope's Promise Initiative. All incorporated by Blackwood, Ross, and Macmillan between 1995 and 2000. Ming Chen's face went pale. Blackwood, I remember that name. He was one of the ones who threatened me. Harrison Blackwood. The former State Attorney General? Morgan asked. Surprised? Yes, he's retired now but still serves on several charitable foundation boards. Ming's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. He was very convincing about what would happen to Sarah if I didn't cooperate. Sarah reached for her mother's hand. Why didn't you tell me about him before? Because he's still dangerous. Even retired, he has connections. Power. Ming looked at Morgan. The kind of power that could make a decorated firefighter look unstable. The kind that could make evidence disappear and witnesses change their stories. Morgan felt the weight of what they were up against settling onto his shoulders. A former State Attorney General, probably other highly placed officials, all convinced they were doing the right thing, or willing to destroy families in the name of their twisted vision of child welfare. So we start with the adoption agencies, he said firmly. Follow the paper trail, find the connections. There must be someone who handled the actual paperwork, someone who might talk. There is, Ming said quietly. Linda Martinez. She was my counterpart at Wellspring. She She had doubts toward the end. Started keeping her own records, just like I did. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona. Martinez? Morgan turned to Sarah. Any relation to... No, she cut him off. But speaking of your partner, we need to be careful. The fewer people who know about this, the better. Ramon's solid, Morgan insisted, and we might need him. He's got contacts in the Latin community, people who might have seen patterns we missed. Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we brief him carefully. Nothing about Emily yet. Nothing that could put her at risk if this goes bad. Jamie had been quiet, studying the map. Mom, these 3 new cases, they're all near Seattle. The implications hung heavy in the air. Sarah moved to the map, adding a new pin. They're watching her, maybe even setting up something to discredit her if she starts asking questions. Morgan felt his heart rate accelerate. Then we're running out of time. Linda Martinez might be our best lead, but Arizona's a long way to go on a hunch. I can't leave, Sarah said. Not with an active investigation, they'd notice. But you, I've got vacation time saved up. Lots of it. Morgan was already thinking it through. A grieving father, finally taking a break after 15 years, going to the desert to clear his head. Nobody would question it. I'll go with you, Jamie said immediately. No. Both Morgan and Sarah spoke simultaneously again. But I can help. I know what questions to ask, what patterns to look for. You can help from here, Morgan said firmly. Keep working with your grandmother, keep digitizing those records, but you, stay safe, both of you. He looked at Ming Chen. The initiative might not know you kept those letters, but if they find out... The elderly woman nodded gravely. We'll be careful. I didn't survive this long by being reckless. Sarah began gathering specific files. I'll put together everything you'll need on Linda Martinez, but Morgan... She met his eyes. If you find her, if she's willing to talk, remember that evidence is what we need, not revenge. Morgan thought of Emily in her police uniform, living a life built on lies. Thought of Jamie, piecing together the truth that had been hidden from his sister. Thought of all the other families torn apart by people who believed they had the right to decide what was best for other people's children. Evidence, he agreed. But once we have it, once we can prove what they did, they're going to learn. What happens when you mess with the wrong family? Outside, the city was recovering from the flood, its streets slowly drying under the autumn sun. But in Sarah Chen's garage, surrounded by maps and files and painful truths, a different kind of storm was brewing. One that would sweep away decades of secrets and lies, and either reunite a family or destroy what little they had left. The Arizona heat hit Morgan like a physical force as he stepped out of his rental car. Scottsdale sprawled before him, all adobe walls and carefully manicured desert landscaping. Linda Martinez's last known address was a small ranch house on the outskirts of town, its stucco walls bleached nearly white by decades of relentless sun. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah Chen. Hospital records confirmed. Linda Martinez admitted last week. Terminal cancer. If you're going to talk to her, do it soon. Morgan checked his watch. Visiting hours had just started at Paradise Valley Hospital. The house could wait. 20 minutes later, he stood outside. Room 437, rehearsing the careful script he and Sarah had prepared. But nothing could have prepared him for the woman he found inside. Linda Martinez was a shadow, her once sturdy frame withered by disease and time, but her eyes, dark, alert, and haunted, fixed on Morgan with immediate recognition. I knew you'd come eventually, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas Morgan, Emily's father. Morgan felt the floor shift beneath his feet. You remember me? A thin smile crossed her face. I remember all of them, every parent, every child. They're why I kept the records. She gestured weakly toward a canvas bag in the corner. Everything's there. I've been waiting for someone to claim it. Morgan moved to the chair beside her bed, his heart thundering in his chest. Mrs. Martinez, I need to understand. Linda, please. She adjusted her position slightly, wincing. And I know what you need. The same thing all the parents needed. Answers, truth. She closed her eyes briefly. I can give you both, but first tell me, how did you find me? Ming Chen, Morgan said, watching her reaction carefully. She said you might be willing to talk. Linda's eyes opened, showing the first spark of real emotion. Ming survived. They told us she'd been dealt with. She survived, protected her daughter, protected evidence. Smart woman, braver than me. Linda's fingers plucked restlessly at her blanket. I just kept quiet, kept my head down, kept the records because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do something. Morgan leaned forward. The records, what exactly do they show? Everything. Linda's voice strengthened with purpose. Birth certificates, both real and forged. Adoption papers, financial transactions, but most importantly, automatically. Thank you, she managed. The bag, bring it here. You need to understand what you're dealing with. Morgan retrieved the canvas bag. It was heavier than he expected, packed with manila envelopes and USB drives. Harrison Blackwood wasn't the mastermind, Linda said as Morgan began examining the contents. He was just the public face. The real power was Eleanor Blackwood, his wife. Morgan looked up sharply. The children's court judge? Linda nodded. She had the connections, the authority to push through adoptions without questions. She believed she was saving children from unfit parents. Firefighters, police officers, military, anyone she decided put their duty before their families. Morgan's hands clenched. She played God with other people's children. She's still playing God. Linda's voice carried an edge of urgency. The initiative never stopped, it evolved. Now they target parents who speak out against corruption, who challenge the system. They're not just stealing children anymore, they're silencing dissent. She pointed to one of the USB drives. 3 months ago, a Seattle police officer started investigating corruption in her department. Officer Emily Chen. Morgan's blood ran cold. What happened? She was getting too close to operations linked to the initiative. They started building a case against her. Planted evidence, fabricated complaints. They're going to try to take her child. Her child? Morgan felt the room spin slightly. Linda's eyes filled with tears. She has a 4-year-old daughter, Grace. They're planning to use the same playbook they used 15 years ago. Create a crisis, exploit the confusion, make the parent look negligent. Morgan thought of the map in Sarah's garage, the cluster of pins around Seattle. It hadn't been about watching Emily. They'd been setting up their next operation. When? His voice was hoarse. Soon. Days. Maybe weeks. Eleanor Blackwood personally oversees cases involving law enforcement. She calls them priority interventions. Linda's hand shot out, grabbing Morgan's wrist with surprising strength. There's more. Emily Chen, she's not just any officer. She's your daughter, isn't she? Morgan nodded, unable to speak. I processed. Her paperwork, one of my last cases before I couldn't do it anymore. I kept special records of that one because... She trailed off, gathering strength. Because of how you fought, how you never gave up. I thought maybe someday. Why now? Morgan asked. Why come forward after all these years? Linda's laugh turned into another cough. Terminal cancer has a way of clarifying things, of showing you what matters. She gestured to the bag. Everything you need is there. Proof of what they did, what they're still doing. Bank records, correspondence, internal memos, enough to bring down the whole operation. If they know you have this, they don't. As far as they know, I'm just a dying old woman with a guilty conscience. Her smile was bitter. But they're watching Emily, and if they decide she's a threat... Morgan stood gathering the bag carefully. I won't let them hurt her, or Grace. There's one more thing. Linda's voice was fading. The effort of conversation, clearly taxing her. In the blue envelope, Emily's original birth certificate, her real name, everything that was taken from her. She caught his eye. She deserves to know who she is, who her father is. Morgan felt tears threatening. Thank you. Don't thank me. I was part of it. Part of stealing all those children. Her eyes drifted closed. Just when you bring them. Go down, make sure everyone knows. Make sure no one can ever do this again. Morgan waited until her breathing steadied into sleep. Then he took out his phone, dialing Sarah Chen's number. "We have a problem," he said when she answered. "A big one. Emily's in danger, and she's not the only one." He could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath. "What kind of danger?" "The kind that runs in the family," Morgan said grimly, thinking of his granddaughter, a child he hadn't known existed until today. "How fast can you get to Seattle?" "I'll need a few days to arrange things here, to make sure Jamie and my mother are safe." There was a pause. "How bad is it?" Morgan looked at the sleeping form of Linda Martinez, at the bag of evidence that might finally expose decades of systematic child abduction. "Bad enough that we're going to need help. Call Martinez, Ramon. Tell him everything. We're going to need someone we trust watching our backs here. And Emily?" And Morgan thought of his daughter in her police uniform, investigating corruption, unknowingly threatening the very people who had stolen her from him. Thought of her daughter, his granddaughter, in the crosshairs of the same organization that had destroyed so many families. "I'm heading to Seattle tonight," he said. "If they're planning what Linda says they're planning, we don't have much time." "Morgan," Sarah's voice was tight with concern. "Be careful. If they realize you know, they took my daughter once," Morgan said, steel in his voice. "They're not taking my granddaughter, not while I'm breathing." He ended the call and took one last look at Linda Martinez. She had given him the key to everything, truth, justice, redemption, but she had also handed him a ticking clock. Somewhere in Seattle, his daughter was unknowingly challenging the same powerful people who had orchestrated her kidnapping 15 years ago. And this time, they weren't planning to stop with just taking her child. This time, they meant to destroy her completely. Morgan clutched the canvas bag closer. Inside was everything needed to bring down the initiative. But first, he had to save his family, all of it. 30,000 feet above the Rockies, Morgan sat in the darkened cabin of a red-eye flight to Seattle, his badge heavy in his pocket. The canvas bag from Linda Martinez was secured in the overhead compartment, but its contents weighed on his mind more than any physical burden. He'd spent the last 3 hours reviewing documents on his laptop, each new revelation stoking a fire that threatened to consume his professional detachment. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Sarah. "Martinez is in. He's watching the Blackwoods. Judge Eleanor just booked a flight to Seattle, arriving tomorrow morning." Morgan's jaw clenched. They were moving faster than expected. He opened the folder containing the photo Sarah had sent him weeks ago. Emily, in her police uniform, and then clicked to a new image Linda's files had revealed. Emily at a park, pushing a laughing, dark-haired child on a swing. Grace, his granddaughter. The flight attendant paused at his row. "Sir, are you all right?" Morgan realized he was gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Fine," he managed, "just not a fan of flying." But it wasn't the flight that had him on edge. It was the growing understanding of just how deep the initiative's corruption ran. Linda's records painted a picture of an organization that had evolved from its original misguided mission into something far more insidious. They weren't just saving children anymore. They were weaponizing family bonds, using the threat of separation to control parents who threatened their interests. His phone buzzed again. A message from Jamie. "Mom says I'm not supposed to help anymore, but I found something. Emily's been looking into Judge Blackwood's connection to a private juvenile detention center, the same one where kids sometimes disappear from." Morgan's pulse quickened. Of course, Emily would investigate something like that. She had his instincts, his drive for justice, even if she didn't know why. The next message was a link to Emily's social media, carefully locked down, as you'd expect from a police officer, but with one recent public post. A photo of Grace in a ballet costume, taken outside the Seattle Dance Academy, posted just hours ago. The caption read, "My little dancer's first recital this weekend. Proud Mom." Morgan felt his throat tighten. He'd missed Emily's entire childhood. Her first steps, first words, first day of school. Now he had a granddaughter who was about to have her first dance recital, and the same people who had stolen his daughter were planning to steal her too. His phone lit up again. Sarah called in a favor. Got access to Emily's recent case files. She's uncovered financial links between the detention center and shell companies owned by Harrison Blackwood. She's scheduled to present her findings to Internal Affairs next week. The pieces clicked into place. The initiative wasn't just planning to take Grace. They were going to destroy Emily's career, her credibility, her entire life. They'd use her own investigation against her, somehow twist it to make her look corrupt or unstable, just like they'd done to him 15 years ago. Morgan opened another document from Linda's files, a psychological assessment of Emily Chen, dated 3 months ago. It was thorough, clinical, and utterly chilling in its calculations. They'd been watching her for years, noting every vulnerability, every pressure point. They knew about her insomnia, her fear of storms, her collection of lockets. They knew she was a single mother, that Grace's father wasn't in the picture. They knew she worked extra shifts to afford Grace's dance lessons. They knew everything, except who she really was. His phone buzzed one final time. Martinez. Eleanor Blackwood just called an emergency meeting of the family court. Filed paperwork for an emergency removal order. No details yet, but Morgan didn't need the details. He knew their playbook now. They'd orchestrate some kind of crisis, probably during Grace's recital, when they could guarantee where both mother and daughter would be. They'd exploit Emily's extra shifts, her single-parent status, paint her as overworked and negligent. By the time she realized what was happening, Grace would be gone, unless he stopped them. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their descent into Seattle. Morgan stared out at the city lights below, remembering another night 15 years ago, when he'd failed to protect his daughter from people who thought they knew better than him what was best for her. His badge caught the overhead light, reminding him of his oath, not just as a firefighter, but as a father. He'd spent his entire career saving other people's children. Now it was time to save his own, but Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. Evidence, not revenge. The problem was, he wasn't sure he could separate the two anymore. Not with his daughter's life and career on the line. Not with his granddaughter, in danger. His phone lit up with a final message from Sarah. "Remember, we do this right, or we don't do it at all. Emily's a cop. She deserves the truth, not just protection." Morgan closed his eyes, feeling the plane bank toward the runway. Sarah was right. Emily wasn't just his daughter. She was a police officer investigating corruption. She had a right to know what she was up against, had a right to know why she collected lockets, why storms frightened her, why certain memories felt just out of reach. Had a right to know her father had never stopped looking for her. But first, he had to make sure she and Grace stayed safe long enough to hear the truth. Had to find a way to protect them without revealing himself too soon, without tipping off the initiative that their carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down. The plane touched down with a jolt that matched Morgan's resolve. In his pocket, his badge pressed against his heart like a promise. He was done watching from a distance, done letting others dictate his family's fate. Eleanor Blackwood and her initiative were about to learn what happened when you threatened. The child, and now the grandchild, of a man who'd spent 30 years running into fires to save other people's families. This time, he was running into the fire to save his own. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Around him, passengers began gathering their belongings. But Morgan remained seated, mentally reviewing everything he knew about the Seattle Dance Academy's layout, security, potential exit routes. Old habits from his firefighting training, repurposed. For a very different kind of rescue. "Sir?" The flight attendant was back. "We've landed. You can disembark now." Morgan nodded, standing slowly. In less than 48 hours, his daughter's little girl would be performing her first ballet recital. Eleanor Blackwood and her people would be there, ready to tear another family apart. But this time, they weren't the only ones with a plan. This time, Thomas Morgan was ready for them. The Seattle Public Library's conference room had become their makeshift command center. Morgan spread Linda Martinez's documents across the table, while Ramon Martinez, no relation, but now deeply invested in the case, mapped out surveillance photos of Eleanor Blackwood's recent arrivals. "She's not staying at any major hotels," Ramon reported, his voice low despite the room's privacy. "Instead, she's using this property." He pointed to a mansion in the affluent Madison Park neighborhood, owned by a shell corporation that traces back to the same network as the juvenile detention center Emily's investigating. Sarah Chen, who had arrived that morning on a separate flight to avoid detection, studied the photographs. "She's not alone. I count at least 3 private security contractors, ex-military based on their bearing." 4, Morgan corrected, his trained eye catching another figure in the background. "They're running rotating shifts, professional setup." "They're not here just for Grace," Sarah said, pulling out Emily's case files. "Look at this. In the past month, Emily's investigation has uncovered over $2 million in suspicious transfers between the detention center and offshore accounts." Morgan leaned in, examining the financial records. "These dates, they correspond with other child removals, don't they?" "Yes." Jamie's voice came through Sarah's laptop speaker. Despite their instructions, the boy had continued his research from home. "Every major transfer lines up with a priority intervention case. They're not just taking kids, they're selling them." The adults exchanged grim looks. Morgan felt his hands curl into fists. "How did we miss this? All these years?" "Because we were looking for a conspiracy to take children," Sarah said quietly. "Not a human trafficking operation disguised as child protective services." Ramon whistled softly. "No wonder they're moving so fast against Emily. She's not just threatening to expose one case, she could bring down their entire operation." "Which makes her and Grace even bigger targets," Morgan growled. He pulled out the dance recital program they'd obtained. "The performance is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Grace is in the first group. According to Linda's files, they like to move during public events, less suspicious when everything's already chaotic." Sarah nodded. "They'll have people inside, probably posing as other parents or staff. Once they make their move on Grace, they'll have everything in place to paint Emily as unstable when she reacts." "We can't let them get that far," Morgan said. He unfolded a blueprint of the Seattle Dance Academy. "The building has 4 exits, but the backstage area where the children prepare only has 2. If they're following their usual pattern, they'll want to take Grace before the performance," Ramon finished. "Less witnesses, less security footage to worry about." "Exactly." Morgan marked positions on the blueprint. "Ramon, I want you here, watching the main entrance. Sarah, you take the staff. Parking lot." You'll stay back," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Morgan, you can't be anywhere near Emily. Not yet. If she recognizes you—" "She won't," Morgan said. But uncertainty crept into his voice. "She was only 8 when—" "She's a cop," Sarah reminded him. "A good one. And she has your instincts. We can't risk her realizing something's wrong before we have all the pieces in place." Morgan wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. The success of their plan, and possibly Emily and Grace's safety, depended on timing everything perfectly. His phone buzzed. Another message from Jamie. "Found something weird in grandmother's old files. Judge Blackwood made 3 calls to Seattle this morning, 1 to the dance academy." Morgan felt his blood run cold. "They're already moving. Sarah, I'm on it." She was already dialing her phone. "I still have contacts in Seattle PD. I'll have them run background checks on every new employee or volunteer at the academy in the last month." Won't matter, Ramon said grimly. These people are ghosts, professional forgers, deep-cover identities. We won't find them through official channels. Morgan stared at the blueprint, memories of old fires and rescues flooding back. Then we don't look for them. We look for their exit strategy. He traced a path with his finger. The academy backs onto an alley. Service entrance for deliveries. Perfect for a quick extraction. Sarah's phone chirped. She read the message, her face darkening. Emily's been called in for a routine review of her investigation. Tomorrow morning, just hours before the recital. A distraction, Morgan said. They'll try to keep her tied up at the station while they move on Grace. But that means... Ramon's eyes widened. They must have someone inside the department, someone high up enough to arrange that kind of review. Sarah was already pulling up personnel files. The deputy chief, Richard Harrison, he's on the board of directors for the Juvenile Detention Center. Jamie's voice came through the laptop, and his wife runs a private adoption agency in Portland. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a network more vast and insidious than any of them had imagined. Not just judges and social workers, but police officials, business leaders, all working together to traffic children under the guise of protecting them. Morgan felt the weight of his badge again, thinking of all the times he'd trusted the system, believed in the institutions that were supposed to protect families, not tear them apart. We need to move first, he said finally. Before the review, before the recital. We need to get Emily and Grace somewhere safe, show her the evidence. And risk the whole network going underground? Sarah challenged. Once they realize we're onto them, they'll destroy records, disappear assets. All those other families, all those children still in their system. Morgan slammed his hand on the table. I am not gambling with my granddaughter's safety. Not again. Not after. He broke off as the conference room door opened. A librarian poked her head in. Is everything all right in here? Fine, Sarah said, smoothly. Just a heated discussion about historical records. After the librarian left, Ramon spoke up. What if we do both? Protect Grace and Emily while gathering enough evidence to take down the whole operation. How? Morgan demanded. Ramon smiled grimly. They're not the only ones who can create a crisis. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Morgan looked at his old partner, understanding dawning. The recital... a controlled burn. Ramon nodded. Give them what they're expecting, but on our terms. Let them think their plan is working. While we document everything, Sarah finished. Every player, every move. It's risky, Morgan said. If anything goes wrong, everything's already wrong, Sarah reminded him quietly. Has been for 15 years. But now we have a chance to make it right. Not just for Emily and Grace, but for all of them. Morgan looked at the photos spread across the table. Eleanor Blackwood's mansion, the dance academy blueprint, Emily in her police uniform, Grace in her ballet costume, his daughter and granddaughter, both in danger because they'd inherited his stubborn drive for justice. Okay, he said finally, but we do this right. Every contingency covered, every exit watched. And I want Linda's files ready to go public the moment we move. If something happens to any of us... Already handled, Jamie's voice came through the laptop. Dead man's switch. If anything goes wrong, everything gets sent to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the country. Sarah started to scold her son, but stopped herself. Instead, she gave Morgan a look that mixed pride and worry. Like mother, like daughter, like son. Stubbornness runs in both our families, it seems. Morgan managed a small smile. Let's hope. It runs in all 3 generations. They're going to need it for what's coming. Outside the library, Seattle's afternoon traffic moved through rain-slicked streets. Somewhere in that city, his daughter was pursuing a truth she didn't yet understand, while his granddaughter practiced ballet steps for a recital that was about to become a battleground. Tomorrow, one way or another, the shadows that had haunted their family for 15 years would be dragged into the light. Morgan just prayed they were ready for what that light would reveal. The Seattle Dance Academy's security cameras showed normal morning activity. Parents dropping off excited children, dance instructors arriving with coffee cups, the usual controlled chaos of a performance day. But Morgan, watching the feeds from a borrowed maintenance office, saw what others missed. The security guard who checked his phone too frequently. The new volunteer coordinator whose posture screamed military training. The maintenance van that had been parked in the loading dock. For 30 minutes too long. 2 more just arrived, Ramon reported through their secure channel. Black SUV, diplomatic plates, private security, definitely initiative. They're earlier than expected, Sarah's voice crackled back. She was positioned in the staff parking lot, posing as a dance mom, complete with a bag of forgotten ballet shoes. The review board just called Emily in. She's arguing to postpone until after the recital. Morgan checked his watch. 10:47 a.m. The recital wasn't until 2 p.m., but they'd predicted the initiative would move early. What they hadn't expected was just how many people they'd committed to this operation. "I count 12 potential hostiles," he said quietly. "They're not just here for a simple snatch and grab. This is a full containment operation." "Makes sense," Ramon replied. "Emily's investigation is too close to their trafficking network. They need to discredit her completely. Make sure nobody looks too closely at her claims." Morgan's phone vibrated. A text from Jamie. "Security footage shows Judge Blackwood entering the police station 10 minutes ago. She's sitting in on Emily's review." Of course she was. Eleanor Blackwood wouldn't trust anyone else to handle this phase of the operation. Which meant the mansion, Morgan said suddenly. "If Blackwood's at the station, the mansion's security will be lighter. Ramon already on it." Morgan could hear his partner's grin. "Amazing how many plumbing emergencies happen in these old houses. My cousin's company got the call about 20 minutes ago." Sarah's voice carried a note of approval. "The plumbers who'll find evidence of money laundering and offshore accounts while fixing that troublesome pipe, along with documentation of every child they've trafficked through their adoption program," Ramon confirmed. "All completely inadmissible in court, of course, but once it hits the media..." Morgan allowed himself a grim smile. Fight fire with fire indeed. But his attention was drawn back to the security feeds as a small figure in a pink tutu skipped through the front doors, accompanied by an older woman. "Grace just arrived," he reported, his throat tightening at his first real-time sight of his granddaughter, with her grandmother. Not her real grandmother, he reminded himself. Another piece of the initiative's carefully constructed lie. "That's Susan Chen," Sarah confirmed. "My mother's best friend. She has no idea about any of this. She's just helping Emily by bringing Grace early for costume adjustments." Morgan watched his granddaughter disappear into the building, fighting. Every instinct that screamed at him to go to her. How long before they move? "They'll wait until Susan leaves," Sarah analyzed. "Too many witnesses right now, but once Grace is in the backstage area..." Morgan's phone buzzed again. "Jamie, Emily's losing the argument at the station. They're not letting her leave." "She'll come anyway," Sarah said confidently. "She won't miss Grace's first recital, which is exactly what they're counting on." "To make her look unstable," Morgan growled, "abandoning an official review to rush to a dance recital. They'll add it to their evidence of erratic behavior when they move for emergency custody." A burst of static, then Ramon's urgent voice. "Movement at the loading dock. They're bringing in equipment cases, too big for dance gear." Morgan switched. Cameras focusing on the dock. His experienced eye caught the subtle signs, the way the men handled the cases, the reinforced corners. "Those aren't equipment cases. They're transport carriers." "For Grace," Sarah confirmed grimly. "Standard initiative protocol. They like to move the children in hidden compartments in case they're stopped." Morgan felt his blood pressure spike, remembering Linda Martinez's files. How many children had been transported like cargo? How many families torn apart by these people who acted like they were running a legitimate operation? "Susan's leaving," Ramon reported. "Grace is in the dressing room with the other students. Security guard just locked the backstage door." "They'll move soon," Sarah said, "before the other parents start arriving for the show. Morgan, are you—" "In position," he confirmed, already moving from the maintenance office toward his predetermined spot. All those years of studying building layouts for fire safety were paying off in unexpected ways. "Ramon? Ready. Cameras are looped, showing empty hallways. Real feeds recording to secure cloud storage. They'll think they're invisible." Morgan's phone lit up with Jamie's final message. "Mom, traffic cameras show Emily just ran 3 red lights. She'll be there in 5 minutes." Sarah's voice carried equal measures of pride and worry. "Just like I would have done. Just like you would have done, Morgan." "Let's hope she got other things from us too," Morgan said quietly, "because she's going to need them." The next few minutes unfolded with terrible precision. Morgan watched through carefully placed cameras as 4 men moved toward the backstage area. Their movements were practiced, professional. They knew exactly where they were going and what they were doing. "God is isolating Grace now," Ramon reported, "telling her there's a special surprise before the show." Morgan's hands clenched. The same technique they'd probably used 15 years ago with Emily. The same false promise of something special, something exciting. "Emily just pulled into the lot." Sarah's voice was tight with tension. "Moving faster than expected. She must suspect. Something's wrong. Initiative team is at the backstage door," Ramon updated. 30 seconds to breach." Morgan took a deep breath, remembering all the fires he'd fought, all the rescues he'd coordinated. "On my mark," he said clearly. 3, 2, 1. The fire. Alarm shattered the morning quiet with an ear-piercing wail. Instantly, the carefully orchestrated abduction dissolved into chaos. Emergency lights strobed, sprinklers activated in targeted zones, and dozens of small dancers in various states of costume poured into the hallways. "Security cameras are live," Ramon reported with satisfaction. "Every initiative operative fully visible, fully documented." Through the chaos, Morgan caught glimpses of the scene unfolding, initiative operators trying to maintain their cover while searching for Grace in the crowd of identical tutus. Emily arriving just as the first fire truck responded to the automatic alarm. Judge Blackwood arriving seconds later, her face twisted with fury as she realized her carefully planned operation was falling apart. And in the middle of it all, Grace Chen, who had inherited not only her mother's instincts but her grandfather's training, doing exactly what Morgan had anonymously arranged for her dance teacher to practice with all the students last week, following the emergency evacuation route to the designated safe zone, the same safe zone where Sarah Chen waited with a team of trusted officers and enough evidence to bring down the entire initiative. "Package secure." Sarah's voice carried profound relief. "Grace is safe, Emily's with her, and our friends from the initiative, they're about to have a very interesting conversation with internal affairs." Morgan allowed himself to breathe. Phase 1 was complete. Grace was safe. The initiative's attempt to abduct her was fully documented. And in about 30 minutes, Ramon's cousin the plumber would discover enough evidence in Eleanor Blackwood's mansion to launch federal investigations in 12 states. But the hardest part was still to come, because somewhere in that crowd of flashing lights and confused dancers, his daughter was holding her child, not yet knowing that her own history was about to repeat itself in reverse. Not yet knowing that the father she'd been taken from 15 years ago had just helped save her daughter from the same fate. Not yet knowing that everything she thought she knew about her life was about to change. Morgan squared his shoulders and headed for the exit. It was time for the truth to finally come out, all of it. The police command post had taken over a coffee shop across from the dance academy. Emily Chen sat in a corner booth, her daughter asleep against her chest, while Sarah explained how they'd uncovered the initiative's plot. Morgan watched from Outside, his heart aching at the sight of his daughter's face as she processed each new revelation. They were going to take her. Emily's voice carried the same quiet intensity Morgan remembered from her mother. Because of my investigation? Yes, Sarah confirmed, sliding across documents from Linda Martinez's files. But that's not the whole story, Emily. There's something else you need to know, something about your own history. Emily's arms tightened protectively around Grace. What about my history? Morgan saw the moment Sarah hesitated, saw her glance toward the window, where she knew he waited. This was the crucial moment. Everything hinged on how they handled the next few minutes. His phone buzzed. Ramon. Blackwood Mansion evidence is with the feds. Judge Eleanor just been taken into custody. It's starting. Inside the coffee shop, Sarah took a deep breath. Emily, what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything. But I need you to remember that every decision I made to protect you. Emily sat straighter, her detective's instincts visibly engaging. Mom, what are you talking about? Sarah placed a worn silver locket on the table between them. Do you recognize this? Morgan watched his daughter's face as she stared at the locket. Saw the flicker of something, recognition, confusion, memory cross her features. Emily reached for the locket, then pulled her hand back. I collect lockets. I don't know why, but because you had one just like this, Sarah said gently. When you were 8 years old, before the initiative took you from your father, the silence that followed was absolute. Even Grace seemed to sense the weight of the moment, snuggling closer to her mother without waking. That's not... Emily shook her head. I grew up with you. There are photos, school records, all fabricated, Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. The initiative was thorough. They created complete paper trails, altered photographs, even coached you with false memories during the transition period. They called it narrative reconstruction. Emily's training took over, her eyes scanning the documents Sarah had provided. Morgan recognized her expression, the same one he wore when analyzing a fire scene, looking for the point of origin. These records... Emily's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she turned pages. These adoption papers? They're forged? Yes. Your real name is Emily Morgan. Your father is Thomas Morgan, a firefighter. He never stopped looking for you, Emily. Never stopped fighting to find out what happened to you. Emily's head snapped. Up. Morgan, the firefighter who saved Jamie during the flood. Her eyes widened. The locket Jamie had was yours, Sarah confirmed. Your grandmother, my mother. She kept it all these years, along with evidence of what the initiative had done. When Jamie found it in her papers. That's why you were acting strange after the flood, Emily said, her detective's mind putting pieces together. You've known all along who I really was? Yes. Sarah's answer was barely a whisper. I didn't know when they first placed you with me, but later, when I found out the truth about the initiative, about what they'd done, I was in too deep. They had too much power. If I'd tried to tell you then, they would have taken me again, Emily finished. Her law enforcement training was evident in how she processed the information, even as her personal world crumbled. Like they tried to take Grace today. Yes, but it was more than that. By then, you were my daughter. I'd raised you, loved you. The thought of losing you... Sarah's composure cracked. I told myself I was protecting you, that keeping the truth from you was better than risking what they might do if they knew you were starting to remember. Emily was silent for a long moment, absently stroking Grace's hair. I do remember pieces, dreams I could never quite hold on to. A man's voice reading stories, the smell of smoke and leather, a silver locket that only opened if you held it. Just right. Morgan's heart clenched. He'd read those stories every night, sitting in the old leather armchair that still sat in his living room. Your father is here, Sarah said quietly. He helped us stop them from taking Grace. He's been helping build the case against the initiative, gathering evidence of their trafficking operation. Emily's head came up sharply. The trafficking ring I've been investigating, it's the same organization. Yes, the juvenile detention center was just one part of their operation. They've been using the family court system, private adoption, agencies, and criminal justice connections to traffic children for decades. Your father's evidence, combined with your investigation, will bring down their entire network. Emily looked down at her sleeping daughter, then back at the locket. I want to meet him. Morgan's phone buzzed again. Ramon. Federal Task Force. Is moving on initiative operations in 3 states. It's happening. You ready for this? Before Morgan could respond, another message came through, this one from Jamie. She's stronger than anyone knows. Trust her, like she'll need to trust you. Morgan took a deep breath and walked into the coffee shop. Emily's head turned at the sound of the door chime, and for the first time in 15 years, father and daughter locked eyes. He saw the recognition hit her, not just from their brief interaction during Jamie's rescue, but from somewhere deeper, something that had survived narrative reconstruction and false memories and 15 years of separation. Dad. Her voice held 1,000 questions, a lifetime of loss, and just a hint of that 8-year-old girl who had once worn a silver locket. Emily. He stayed where he was, giving her space, though every fiber of his being wanted to rush forward and hold her. I never stopped looking for you. Never stopped trying to find out what happened. Grace stirred in her mother's arms, blinking sleepily at the stranger who wasn't really a stranger. Emily looked down at her daughter, then back at Morgan. You saved her, she said. You figured out what they were planning and you saved her. Like I should have saved you. Morgan's voice was rough with emotion. I'm so sorry, Emily. I should have known something was wrong that day. Should have protected you better. From what Sarah... Emily hesitated, glancing at the woman who had raised her. From what Mom says, there was nothing you could have done. They had it all planned. Had been watching for months. But I never gave up, Morgan said. Even when... They tried to discredit me, tried to make it look like I was unstable. I knew something wasn't right. I knew you were out there somewhere. Emily's law enforcement training warred visibly with her emotional response. The evidence? All of this? She gestured at the files. It's going to hold up? They can't make it disappear? No, Sarah assured her. It's already in motion. Federal. Agencies are moving on initiative operations right now. Linda Martinez's records, combined with what we found at Eleanor Blackwood's mansion and your own investigation. It's over. They can't hurt anyone else. Emily stood carefully, laying Grace gently on the booth seat. She took one step toward Morgan, then another, her face a complex mix of emotions. I remember the stories, she said softly. You used to do all the voices, especially in Where the Wild Things Are. Morgan felt tears threatening. It was your favorite. You knew all. The words by heart, another step. You smelled like smoke and leather from your firefighting gear. I used to fall asleep in your lap in that big chair. I still have it, Morgan managed. Still sit there sometimes remembering. Emily closed the final distance between them. For a moment they just stood there, 15 years of loss and longing suspended between them. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand. I have so many questions, she said. So much I need to know. I'll tell you everything, Morgan promised. Whatever you want to know, whenever you're ready to hear it. Emily glanced back at her sleeping daughter, then at Sarah, who watched them with tears streaming down her face. I have 2 families, she said wonderingly. 2 sets of parents who would do anything to protect me. And a brother, Morgan reminded her with a small smile. Jamie's been instrumental in putting all this together. He's quite the investigator. Like his sister, Sarah said softly. Emily looked down at the locket still clutched in her hand. I think I'm ready to hear everything. But first, she held out the locket to Morgan. Could you show me how to open it? I remember there was a trick. Morgan took the locket, his fingers finding the familiar catch. Like this, he demonstrated. You have to press here and here at the same time. The locket clicked open, revealing two photos: Emily at 8 years old, and Morgan holding her on his shoulders at a park, both of them laughing, both unaware of how their world was about to change. Emily stared at the photos for a long moment. Then, with tears in her eyes but strength in her voice, she said, "Tell me everything, Dad. Start at the beginning." And as Grace slept peacefully in the booth and Sarah watched with bittersweet pride, Morgan began to tell his daughter the story of how she was lost and found, and how love, in all its complex, messy, unexpected forms, had finally brought their family back together. The Seattle Police Department's conference room hummed with focused energy as federal agents, local law enforcement, and their unlikely family alliance gathered around a table covered with evidence. Emily stood at the head of the room, her detectives, badge catching the fluorescent light as she outlined the scope of their discovery. "The initiative's network extends through 12 states, she explained, her voice steady despite the personal stakes involved. "We've identified 37 judges, 22 police officials, and over 50 social workers who were either willing participants or coerced through blackmail." Morgan watched his daughter with pride, seeing how she'd grown into the kind of person who could face devastating personal revelations and still focus on helping others. Grace sat beside him, coloring quietly while the adults worked, occasionally looking up at her newly discovered grandfather with curious eyes. "The federal task force is ready to move," Agent Diana Walsh confirmed, spreading out surveillance photos across the table. "But we have a problem. Harrison Blackwood has disappeared." Sarah Chen, who'd been reviewing financial records, looked up sharply. "When?" "Shortly after his wife's arrest. We think he had a backup plan, a way to destroy evidence and disappear. If the initiative was ever exposed." "He won't run," Morgan said with certainty. "Not Harrison Blackwood. His whole life is built on the illusion of respectability, of moral authority. Running would destroy that image." Emily nodded, pulling up additional files on her laptop. "Dad's right. Look at his pattern over the years. Every time the initiative faced scrutiny, he didn't retreat. He attacked, made public statements about protecting children, launched investigations into his critics. Classic narcissistic behavior," Ramon added from his position by the door. "He truly believes he's the hero of this story, which makes him dangerous," Sarah warned. "A man like that cornered will try to take control of the narrative," Emily finished. She turned to Agent Walsh. "Have you checked his media contacts, his speaking engagements?" Walsh's eyes widened slightly. "He's scheduled to give a keynote address tomorrow at the National Child Welfare Conference, here in Seattle." "Perfect timing," Morgan growled. "He'll try to spin this his way, paint himself as the victim of some conspiracy. While destroying evidence and threatening witnesses," Sarah added. "He'll have contingency plans in place, dead man's switches." Emily was already moving, her mind working through the tactical implications. "We need to coordinate with conference security, get plainclothes officers in place. If he follows his usual pattern, he'll have private security," Ramon interjected. "Ex-military, like the team at the dance academy." "But we have something they don't," Jamie's voice came through the speakerphone. Despite protests, he'd insisted on staying connected to the operation from Sarah's secured home office. "We have proof of every child they took, every family they destroyed, including yours, Emily." Morgan watched his daughter absorb this, saw her hand drift unconsciously to the locket she now wore. "Jamie's right," she said finally. "Blackwood's power has always come from controlling the story. This time, we control it." She turned to Agent Walsh. "How quickly can you get me on that conference schedule?" "Emily," Sarah started, concern evident in her voice. "That's too risky. If Blackwood realizes who you are—" "He won't," Emily said firmly. "Not until it's too late. I'm still Detective Chen to him, just another cop who got too close to his operation. He doesn't know about the locket, about Dad, about any of it." Morgan stood, understanding where she was going with this. You want to let him make his speech, let him dig himself deeper, and then expose him in front of everyone he's trying to impress, Emily confirmed, with federal agents in place to prevent any violence. Walsh was already making calls, coordinating with her team. Ramon moved to study the conference center's layout, his firefighters' training complementing Emily's police experience. We'll need to protect Grace, Sarah said quietly. If anything goes wrong, she'll be with me, Morgan replied, his hand resting protectively on his granddaughter's shoulder. In a secure location with a federal protective detail. Won't you, sweetheart? Grace looked up from her coloring. Like a secret mission. Exactly like that, Emily managed to smile for her daughter. You and Grandpa Morgan have a very important job. You need to stay safe so I can focus on mine. Morgan felt his throat tighten at being called Grandpa Morgan for the first time. Grace seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded. I'm good at staying safe. Like in the dance school when the bad people came. The adults exchanged glances, reminded again of how close they'd come to losing her. How many other children hadn't been so fortunate. We'll need to coordinate with the media, Walsh said, hanging up her phone. Once this breaks, it needs to break big. No chance for Blackwood or his allies to contain it. Already handled. Jamie's voice came through the speaker again. I've got compilation files ready to send to every major news outlet. Video evidence, financial records, victim testimonials. Once Emily gives the signal, it all goes live. Sarah started to object to her son's involvement again, then stopped herself. You really are your sister's brother, she said instead. Pride mixing with resignation, Emily moved to the conference room window, looking out over the city she'd sworn to protect. Tomorrow morning, Harrison Blackwood will stand in front of hundreds of child welfare professionals and try to justify destroying families in the name of protecting children. He'll expect to see me there, the troublesome detective who needs to be discredited. She turned back to the room, and Morgan saw, in her face, the same determination that had driven him for 15 years. Instead, he's going to face every family he's torn apart, every child he's trafficked, every lie he's told, and he's going to learn what happens when you underestimate the bonds between parents and their children. The room was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of what they were about to attempt. Then Grace spoke up from her coloring. Mommy, can I wear my ballet costume for the secret mission? The tension broke as several people chuckled. Emily crossed to her daughter, dropping a kiss on her head. How about we save the ballet costume for your rescheduled recital, the one where no bad people will come to bother us? Promise? Promise, Emily said firmly, meeting Morgan's eyes over their granddaughter's head. No one is ever going to take you away from your family. Any of your family. Morgan watched his daughter and granddaughter, thinking of all the years lost, all the moments missed, but also thinking of the future they were fighting to protect, not just for their family, but for all the families the initiative had targeted. Tomorrow, Harrison Blackwood would learn that some things couldn't be controlled, couldn't be bought, couldn't be broken. Some things, like the love between parent and child, survived every attempt to sever them, and sometimes they came back stronger than ever. All right, Agent Walsh said, checking her watch. Let's go over the operation one more time. Tomorrow morning, everything has to work perfectly. The room refocused on their task, but Morgan noticed how Emily kept one hand on her locket, drawing strength from the tangible connection to her past, to her true identity, to the family that had never stopped, fighting to find her. The National Child Welfare Conference's main hall was packed with professionals from across the country. Harrison Blackwood stood at the podium, every inch the distinguished elder statesman in his perfectly tailored suit. His silver hair caught the stage lights as he delivered his keynote address with practiced conviction. For 30 years, I've dedicated my life to protecting our most vulnerable citizens, he intoned, his voice carrying the weight of assumed moral authority. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions, Sometimes it means recognizing that love alone is not enough to raise a child. Emily sat in the middle of the audience, her detective's badge concealed beneath her blazer. She could feel Agent Walsh's team scattered throughout the crowd, waiting for her signal. In her ear, a tiny communications device kept her connected to the operation. "Security teams in position," Ramon's voice came through clearly. No sign of Blackwood's private contractors yet. "They're here," Sarah responded from her position near the emergency exit. 3 in the lobby, 2 by the service entrance, professional but nervous. Emily kept her eyes on Blackwood, watching for the subtle tells she'd learned to recognize in her years of police work. The slightly too perfect posture, the calculated pauses in his speech, the way his left hand stayed close to his jacket pocket, where he likely carried a phone that could trigger his contingency plans. "In these challenging times," Blackwood continued, "we must ask ourselves what truly serves the best interests of the child. When a parent's chosen profession puts them in constant danger, constantly away from home, can we honestly say that's a stable environment?" Emily's hand moved to her locket, drawing strength from it as Blackwood unknowingly described the justification. He'd used to steal her from her father. In her ear, she heard Morgan's sharp intake of breath from his secure location with Grace. "Federal agents have full coverage of all exits," Walsh updated quietly. "All electronic communications in the building are being monitored. He's trapped, even if he doesn't know it yet." Emily checked her watch. "Right on schedule," Jamie's voice came through the comm. "Media packages deployed. Every major network just received the full documentation. They're starting to run the story now." On cue, phones began buzzing throughout the audience. Emily watched as Blackwood noticed the disturbance, saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross his face as attendees began looking at their screens with growing shock. "Ladies and gentlemen," he tried to recover, "if we could please silence our phones." "I have a question, Mr. Blackwood." Emily stood, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "About your definition of protecting children." Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly as he recognized her. "Detective Chen, I wasn't aware you were on the schedule. Perhaps we could discuss your concerns after the presentation." "I think now is the perfect time," Emily replied, moving toward the center aisle. "While we have so many child welfare experts present, I'd like their professional opinion on the initiative's definition of child protection." The room had gone completely still. Blackwood's hand moved closer to his jacket pocket. "I wouldn't," Emily said calmly. "Your emergency protocols have already been neutralized. Your private security team is currently being detained, and your wife is cooperating with federal investigators as we speak." Color drained from Blackwood's face, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Detective, but these kinds of unfounded accusations are backed by 30 years of evidence." Emily cut him off. She reached the front of the room, turning to face the audience. "Evidence of how the initiative identified target families, how they manipulated the system to declare loving parents unfit, how they trafficked children through a network of corrupt judges, social workers, and police officials." Phones continued buzzing as news alerts flooded in. On the massive screens behind Blackwood, designed to show his presentation slides, media coverage began appearing instead. Financial records, surveillance photos, court documents showing patterns of suspicious child removals. "This is absurd," Blackwood attempted, but his practiced confidence was cracking. "These are complex cases, situations you couldn't possibly understand." "I understand perfectly," Emily said, her voice taking on an edge that made him step back slightly. "I understand how you watched families for months, looking for any vulnerability, how you used parents' dedication to public service as a weapon against them, how you convinced yourselves you were doing the right thing while destroying thousands of lives." She reached for her locket, holding it up so he could see it clearly. "Do you recognize this, Mr. Blackwood?" He stared at the locket, confusion visible. On his face. You should, Emily continued. Your organization documented everything meticulously, including how to manipulate an 8-year-old girl's memories after stealing her from her father. After convincing everyone that a decorated firefighter was too unstable, too dedicated to his dangerous job, to raise his daughter properly. Understanding dawned in Blackwood's eyes, followed quickly by fear. "You're Emily Morgan," she confirmed, her voice carrying to every corner of the now silent room. Badge number 4479, Seattle Police Department. Daughter of Thomas Morgan, the firefighter your initiative decided was unfit to raise me 15 years ago. The screens behind Blackwood now showed split images. Emily's original missing person report next to her police academy graduation photo. Her childhood pictures with Morgan alongside surveillance photos taken by the initiative before her abduction. "But I'm just one story," Emily continued, addressing the stunned audience. "One of thousands. The initiative didn't protect children. It trafficked them, sold them to wealthy families, used them as leverage to silence whistleblowers and activists." Blackwood lunged for his phone, but Emily was faster. 15 years of police training combined with inherited firefighters' reflexes sent her over the podium in a smooth motion. She caught his wrist before he could trigger whatever failsafe he'd planned. "Harrison Blackwood," she said clearly, producing her badge with her free hand. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, trafficking of minors, and corruption of the judicial system. Federal agents are currently arresting your associates across 12 states. The initiative is finished." "You don't understand," Blackwood hissed as Agent Walsh's team moved in to take him into custody. "We saved those children, gave them better lives." "Better?" Emily's voice could have frozen fire. "You stole me from a father who loved me, who never stopped looking for me, who taught me through his example that protecting others is a calling, not a liability." She stepped closer, letting him see the full weight of truth in her eyes. "And 15 years later, when your organization tried to steal my daughter the same way you stole me, that same father helped stop you. That's the legacy of your initiative, Mr. Blackwood. You didn't just fail to break the bonds between parent and child, you made them stronger." As federal agents led Blackwood away, the room erupted in chaos. Reporters who'd been planted in the audience began broadcasting live. Child welfare professionals who'd unwittingly worked with the initiative's front organizations rushed to share information with investigators. Emily's comm unit crackled. "Mom!" Jamie's voice carried clear pride. "It worked. Every major network is running the story. All the evidence is public now." "Good work, son," Sarah responded, emotion evident in her voice. "Your sister would be proud." "Already am," Emily said softly, watching as years of carefully constructed lies crumbled around Harrison Blackwood's empire. "How's Grace?" Showing Grandpa Morgan her ballet routine, Jamie reported with a chuckle. "He's very impressed." Emily felt tears threatening as she imagined the scene. Her daughter, safe with the grandfather she'd nearly lost the chance to know. Her brother, whom she was just getting to know, helping expose the truth about her past. Her two mothers, the one who'd raised her and the one she'd lost, both fighting to protect her in their own ways. Detective Morgan," Agent Walsh approached with a satellite phone. "We have a secure line to the Attorney General. She'd like your statement on the operation." Emily straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of her badge and the comfort of her locket. "Actually," she said clearly, "it's Detective Chen Morgan now. Both names, both families, both parts of who I am." She took the phone, ready to tell the world how love and justice had finally untangled the web of lies that had separated her from her father, ready to ensure that no other family would suffer what hers had endured, ready to be, at last, her complete self. Emily Chen Morgan, daughter of a firefighter and a police detective, sister to a tech-savvy teenager, mother to a brave little ballerina, and living proof that some bonds couldn't be broken by any amount of power or corruption. Some bonds only grew stronger through the fire of adversity. The Seattle Police Department's largest conference room had been transformed into a family reunification center. Morgan watched from a quiet corner as Emily coordinated with social workers and counselors, her detective's badge catching the light as she moved between families. Each group represented a story similar to their own, parents and children separated by the initiative's machinations, now facing the complex journey of reconnection. "She's good at this," Sarah said softly, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. "She knows exactly what they're going through." Morgan accepted the coffee, noting how naturally they'd begun sharing these small gestures of co-parenting. "She has both our experiences to draw from, the parent who lost a child and the one who raised them not knowing the truth." Across the room, Grace sat with Jamie at a computer station, helping him document each family's story. The girl had appointed herself unofficial greeter, offering crayons and paper to shell-shocked children while their parents navigated complicated emotions and paperwork. "Morgan family?" A counselor approached with a tablet. "We have another match you should know about." Emily joined them, her face showing the strain of 18 straight hours managing the aftermath of Blackwood's arrest. "What is it?" "A firefighter in Boston," the counselor explained, pulling up records. "Michael Sullivan. His daughter was taken 12 years ago, age 6. The initiative placed her with a family in Portland." Morgan felt his chest tighten. He'd known Michael from national firefighting conferences, had even shared a drink with him once, neither man knowing they carried the same hidden wound. "He never gave up looking," the counselor continued, "kept investigating even after they forced him into early retirement. When the story broke this morning, he recognized the pattern. His daughter's case matched all the initiative's markers." Emily studied the file, her detective's training evident in her focused expression. "Have you contacted her current family?" "That's why I'm here." The counselor looked uncomfortable. "She's a student at the University of Washington, right here in Seattle." Sarah drew in a sharp breath. All this time, they were placing children in cities where they'd already hidden others, creating a network where everyone was watching everyone else without knowing it. "But why?" Jamie asked, joining them with Grace. "Why keep the stolen children so close together?" "Control," Emily answered grimly. "If anyone started asking questions, they could threaten to expose other families, create chaos. It was insurance." Morgan thought of all the times he'd passed. Other parents on the street, never knowing they might be raising someone else's stolen child, never knowing his own daughter was being raised just a few hours away. "Michael's daughter, Katie, she's studying psychology," the counselor added, "specializing in trauma and family separation. Even without knowing her own history, she chose to help others through similar pain." Emily smiled slightly. "Like father, like daughter. Even when they tried to break those bonds, something remained. Something drew us all back to helping others." "Niku," counselor nodded. Would you be willing to help with their reunification? Given your unique perspective as both a law enforcement officer and someone who's been through this." "Of course," Emily said without hesitation. She turned to Morgan. "Dad, would you reach out to Michael, firefighter to firefighter?" Morgan nodded, already pulling out his phone. Some conversations could only happen between people who'd walked the same burning path. "Grace, honey," Emily called to her daughter, "would you help set up the meeting room? Maybe draw some pictures to make it feel more welcoming." Grace took her job as reunion helper very seriously, gathering her art supplies. "Can I draw firefighter? Pictures for Katie's dad?" "That's perfect," Sarah smiled, watching her granddaughter head off with Jamie in tow. "She has both your hearts, the protector and the healer." Morgan finished sending a text to Michael Sullivan, remembering his own emotions during those first moments of reunion. "How many more?" he asked quietly. "How many other families are out there, not yet knowing their stories might have happy endings?" Hundreds, Emily replied, checking her tablet. Maybe thousands. The initiative's records go back 30 years. Agent Walsh's team is still uncovering shell companies, false identities, hidden connections. But they're not hiding anymore, Jamie pointed out, his young face serious. Everyone knows now, everyone's looking, and we have a system in place to help them find each other. Emily squeezed her brother's shoulder proudly. Thanks to your database work, the pattern recognition algorithm you developed is helping match families faster than we ever could manually. Sarah watched her children, the detective and the tech prodigy, the stolen daughter and the son who helped find her, with tears threatening. I never thought I'd see this day. Never thought we could expose the truth without losing. Everything, Emily finished gently. Mom, you didn't lose me. You helped save me, helped save Grace, helped save all these other families. She gestured around the room. We're not losing family today. We're gaining more of it. As if to prove her point, Grace came running back, her arms full of drawings. Look, I drew firefighter Michael with his badge and Katie with her books, and then both of them together. Morgan knelt to examine the artwork, seeing how his granddaughter had captured both the pain of separation and the joy of reunion in her childish drawings. In each picture, the subjects wore silver lockets, Grace's symbol for family connection ever since learning her mother's story. They're perfect, he assured her. I think they'll help Michael and Katie feel less scared about meeting each other. Were you scared? Grace asked suddenly, looking between Morgan and her mother. When you found each other? Emily knelt beside her father, drawing Grace into their shared embrace. Terrified, she admitted, but also brave, because that's what our family is, brave enough to be scared together. Sarah and Jamie joined them, completing their unlikely family circle. Around them, other families were forming their own circles, some tentative, some tearful, all taking the first steps toward healing wounds that had festered for years. Morgan's phone buzzed. Michael Sullivan had landed at SeaTac. Would be there in an hour. Ready for another reunion? He asked Emily. She touched her locket, then straightened her detective's badge. Ready? Grace, want to help welcome another firefighter's daughter home? Grace beamed, gathering her drawings. Can I tell Katie about how Grandpa Morgan saved me from the bad people? And how Mommy helped catch them? You can tell her whatever you think will help, Emily assured her. Sometimes the best way to heal is to share our stories with others who understand. Morgan watched his daughter and granddaughter prepare to help another family navigate the complex emotions of reunion, marveling at how loss had shaped them all into exactly what each other needed. The initiative thought they could break family bonds, Sarah observed quietly. Instead, they just proved how unbreakable those bonds really are. And created new ones in the process, Jamie added, already pulling up Katie Sullivan's file on his laptop. Extended families connected by shared experience, shared healing. Morgan thought of Michael Sullivan, remembering the haunted look they'd shared years ago over conference center coffee. Soon, that haunted look would be replaced by the same joy Morgan felt every time he looked at his daughter, his granddaughter, his expanded and complicated and beautiful family. All right, Emily called, her detective's voice carrying natural authority. Let's get ready. We have another family to make whole. And as they moved to their positions, Morgan realized that every reunion they helped facilitate was also healing. Their own wounds a little more. Every family restored was a victory not just over the initiative, but over the very concept of breaking parent-child bonds. Some things, it turned out, were truly fireproof. Love was one of them. 1 month after Harrison Blackwood's arrest, Morgan stood in the back of the newly established Family Restoration Center, watching Emily address the largest gathering yet of families affected by the initiative. The former warehouse had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space, with Grace's artwork prominently displayed alongside photos of successful reunions. Each of your stories matters, Emily was saying, her voice carrying the authority of both personal experience and professional expertise. Each connection restored helps us understand more about how to help others still searching. But most importantly, each family reunited proves what we've known all along, that the bonds between parent and child can survive anything, even years of forced separation. Morgan felt a familiar pride watching his daughter command the room. In the month since the initiative's exposure, Emily had become the face of the recovery effort, her unique perspective as both a law enforcement officer and a recovered child, making her the perfect bridge between officials and families. Sarah appeared beside him, coffee in hand as usual. Michael Sullivan's group therapy session just finished, she reported quietly. He and Katie are doing well. She's already talking about expanding her psychology studies to include post-reunion counseling. Like mother, like daughter, Morgan smiled, watching Grace help Jamie set up the computer station where he ran his increasingly sophisticated matching algorithm. They find ways to turn their pain into purpose. The center buzzed with activity. In one corner, a support group for reunited siblings shared experiences. In another, legal advisors helped families navigate the complex process of updating records, and in some cases, legally recognizing both their original and adoptive families. "Dad!" Emily called, waving him over. "Can you tell them about the firefighter network?" Morgan moved to join his daughter at the podium. The initiative he'd started, connecting first responders whose children had been taken, had grown into a nationwide support system. "We've identified 68 firefighters, 93 police officers, and over 100 military personnel whose families were targeted by the initiative," he explained to the assembled group. "Each of them has valuable skills and resources to help with ongoing searches, but more importantly, they understand what you're going through. They've lived it." A hand raised in the audience. "But how do you handle the anger, knowing what was taken from you?" Morgan exchanged looks with Emily before answering. "We channel it into helping others, into making sure this never happens again, into building something stronger than what was broken." As if to demonstrate his point, the center's doors opened to admit Ramon Martinez, accompanying a newly identified family. Morgan recognized the father's bearing immediately, another firefighter still in uniform who'd just learned the truth about his missing child. Emily moved smoothly to greet them, but Grace got there first, offering her now famous welcome. "Get crayons, paper, and a silver locket identical to her mother's. We give these to all the children," she explained to the stunned firefighter, "so they can keep pictures of both their families. Like Mommy does." Morgan watched the man's professional composure crack slightly at his daughter's simple kindness. Sarah stepped in smoothly, guiding the family toward the intake area where Jamie waited to input their information into the database. "3 more matches confirmed this morning," Jamie reported as they approached. 2 in California, 1 in Texas. Local law enforcement is already reaching out, using the protocol Emily developed. The protocol: gentle initial contact, professional. Support ready, no pressure for immediate reunions, had proven crucial in helping families navigate the overwhelming emotions of discovery and reunion. "Grace's art therapy program is helping too," Sarah added proudly, "especially with the younger children. Something about seeing our story through a child's eyes makes it less frightening for them." Morgan looked around the center, marveling at how much had changed in just a month. The raw pain of those first revelations had gradually transformed into something stronger, a community of survivors helping each other heal. His phone buzzed. A message from Michael Sullivan, another firefighter in Miami, had recognized the initiative's patterns in his daughter's decades-old disappearance. "Good Morgan, reach out?" "Go," Emily said, reading his expression. "Do the firefighter to firefighter thing. I've got things handled here." Morgan hesitated. "The press conference is under control," she assured him. "Linda Martinez's medical records are being released today, along with her full testimony. The media will focus on how a dying woman's conscience helped expose decades of corruption. It's a story they can't resist," "And one that keeps the pressure on the ongoing investigations," Sarah added. "Every new revelation brings more families forward." Grace tugged at Morgan's sleeve. "Can I show the new family my special drawing? The one of all of us." Morgan looked where she pointed, at the wall-sized mural she'd created, showing an ever-growing network of interconnected families. Each figure wore a silver locket, each face smiled with the joy of reunion. In the center, their own complicated family stood together. Morgan and Emily, Sarah and Jamie, Grace connecting them all. "Of course, sweetheart," he said softly. "Show them how big a family can become when love refuses to be broken." As Grace led the newcomers to her mural, Emily joined Morgan by the window. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. A month ago, I was just a detective working a corruption case. Now you're helping rewrite the definition of family," Morgan finished. "Proving that love doesn't follow legal documents or blood tests. It follows the heart." Emily touched her locket, a gesture that had become almost unconscious. "I have two mothers who would do anything to protect me. A father who never stopped searching. A brother who helped find me. A daughter who shows me every day how resilient the human spirit can be. And dozens of honorary nieces and nephews," Sarah added, joining them. "Every child reunited with their family becomes part of our extended circle. Every parent who finds their way here becomes another link in the chain." Morgan's phone buzzed again. The Miami firefighter was willing to talk, wanted to know if there was hope after so many years. "Go," Emily said again, hugging him quickly. "Tell him there's always hope. Tell him about Grace's art therapy and Jamie's database and all the resources we've built. Tell him—" "That family finds a way," Morgan finished. "Always." He looked around one last time before leaving, at Grace showing her mural to the shell-shocked newcomers, at Jamie explaining his matching system to eager volunteers, at Sarah organizing the next support group session, at Emily moving confidently. Between families, offering help and hope. The initiative had tried to break these bonds, had spent decades convincing themselves they were saving children by stealing them. Instead, they'd created something unprecedented, a network of families united by shared pain, but strengthened by shared healing. As Morgan headed out to help another firefighter begin his journey of discovery and reunion, he smiled at the sign. Grace had insisted they hang over the center's entrance. "Welcome home. Your family has been waiting." Some truths, it turned out, were stronger than any lie. Some bonds couldn't be broken, only temporarily hidden. And some families grew stronger with every attempt to tear them apart. The proof was all around him, wearing silver lockets and sharing stories, drawing pictures and building databases, healing themselves by helping others heal. The proof was in every smile, every tear, every reunion. The proof was in love that refused to be stolen, no matter how hard anyone tried. 1 year later, Morgan sat in the front row of the Seattle Dance Academy's recital hall, a familiar silver locket resting in his palm. The stage lights dimmed, and Grace appeared in her ballet costume, no longer the scared child who'd nearly been stolen, but a confident performer about to share her art with the world. She insisted on wearing it today. Emily whispered beside him, touching her own matching locket. Said it was only right, since this is the recital she was supposed to have that day. On Morgan's other side, Sarah Chen squeezed his hand in silent understanding. They'd developed their own language of support over the past year, these two parents who shared a daughter's love. Jamie sat next to his mother, his laptop closed for once, letting himself simply be a proud brother watching his niece dance. Till music began, and Grace moved with the kind of freedom that only comes from feeling completely safe, completely loved. In the year since the initiative's exposure, she'd blossomed, no longer just a child who'd escaped a terrible fate, but a symbol of hope for other families still healing. Morgan's thoughts drifted to the Family Restoration Center, where hundreds of silver lockets now hung on the wall of hope, each representing a family reunited. The center had grown beyond their wildest expectations, becoming a national model for healing and reconciliation. Harrison Blackwood's trial had concluded 3 months ago, his conviction bringing formal justice to countless families. But the real healing hadn't happened in courtrooms. It had happened in quiet moments like this, watching a child dance, seeing parents cry happy tears, helping families rebuild bonds that had been temporarily hidden but never truly broken. The initiative's network had been vast, but the network of love and support that rose to replace it proved even larger. Michael Sullivan and his daughter Katie now ran the center's counseling program. Ramon Martinez had established a security consulting firm specializing in protecting at-risk families. Linda Martinez had lived long enough to see the first wave of reunions before passing peacefully, knowing her final act of courage had helped heal so many. Grace's solo reached its crescendo, and Morgan felt tears in his eyes. He remembered another little girl who'd loved to dance, who'd worn a silver locket, who'd been taken from him on a stormy day 15 years ago. But that story hadn't ended in loss. It had transformed into something bigger than himself, bigger than any single family. Emily's hand found his as Grace took her bow. His daughter, now Detective Chen Morgan, head of the newly established Family Reunification Task Force, had never lost her drive to protect others. If anything, her own experience had strengthened it, giving her unique insight into both the law enforcement and human aspects of helping families heal. The audience applauded, but Morgan barely heard them. He was watching his granddaughter scan the crowd until she found their faces, her smile brightening as she spotted all of them together, her complete family, complex and beautiful, in its reconstituted form. Later, as they gathered for the traditional post-recital celebration, Grace pulled out her latest drawing. It showed the wall of hope at the center, but with a new addition, hundreds of tiny dancers, each wearing a silver locket, moving together in perfect harmony. Because dancing is like family, she explained seriously. Sometimes you practice really hard and still make mistakes. Sometimes you fall down, but you always get back up, and it's always better when you dance together. Emily hugged her daughter close, meeting Morgan's eyes over Grace's head. No words were needed. They both understood how far they'd come, how many others they'd helped. Along the way, how love had proven stronger than any force trying to break it. Sarah raised her glass in a quiet toast. To family, she said simply, in all its forms. To love that refuses to be stolen, Jamie added. To dancing together, Grace chimed in. Morgan held up his glass, looking at these people who had become so much more than victims or survivors. They were pioneers, showing others that healing was possible, that family bonds could be restored, that love always found its way home. To silver lockets, he said softly, and the truth they help us carry. Outside, the Seattle sun broke through, the clouds casting warm light through the windows. Somewhere in the city, another family was discovering the truth about their past. Another child was learning they hadn't been abandoned, but stolen. Another parent was finding out their years of searching hadn't been in vain. But they wouldn't face those discoveries alone. They would find their way to the Family Restoration Center, where Grace's artwork lined the walls and Jamie's database hummed with purpose. They would meet Emily, who would show them her locket and share their tears. They would talk to Morgan, who would tell them about fire that forges instead of destroys, about love that survives every attempt to break it. They would learn what the initiative never understood, that family isn't something that can be stolen, hidden, or erased. It's something that lives in the heart, that calls across years and distance, that finds its way home no matter how long the journey. Grace's locket caught the sunlight as she twirled in her ballet costume, sending small reflections dancing across the walls. Morgan watched the light play, thinking of all the stories yet to be uncovered, all the families yet to be reunited, all the healing yet to come. Some fires destroy, But others, the ones fueled by love, by truth, by the unbreakable bonds between parent and child, those fires light the way home, and in their warm glow even the deepest wounds can heal, even the longest separations can end, even the most broken. Families can dance together once again. Morgan touched his own locket, feeling the weight of its truth, the strength of its promise, the hope it would always represent to families still searching. Some stories end, but this one he knew would go on. In every silver locket opened, in every family reunited, in every heart that refused to stop believing in the power of love to find its way home.